welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a really interesting Shakespeare comedy called Merry Wives of Windsor. This comedy is a whole lot of fun with many pranks and jokes throughout it. And as most comedies are, it deals with the topic of love, but perhaps in a slightly different way from some of the other comedies. It's also unique because it lifts some of Shakespeare's best-loved characters out of a completely different genre, out of the history plays, and places them in the world of the comedy. In a lot of ways, The Merry Wives of Windsor feels like it is set in a contemporary time with Shakespeare, as opposed to the historical time of Henry V and IV. It seems very likely, and there are certainly apocryphal stories to this effect, that Shakespeare's audience loved Falstaff and his crew so much they couldn't bear to see him written out of Henry V. And so, because of popular demand, Falstaff, Bardolph, Pistol, Nym, and Mistress Quickly are brought back into a new play. The story goes that Queen Elizabeth asked specifically for a play in which Falstaff falls in love. And this play definitely deals with Falstaff trying to woo the ladies, although it's not Falstaff's love life that we're most interested in here. This play might also be interesting to compare to a play like Taming of the Shrew, because it deals with the idea of domestic peace and tranquility, domestic bliss. Who's in charge of the home? Who calls the shots? One could also compare this with Othello because it deals with the topic of jealousy, and the way jealousy can disrupt the home. In any case, this unique play is a lot of fun, and it's fun to see Falstaff and company in a different light, although that has rubbed some critics the wrong way. For instance, the famous critic Harold Bloom. The play is also made complicated by the fact that it doesn't fit into the timeline of the Henry IV plays, from whence these characters are lifted. But if you accept the fact that Shakespeare doesn't care about continuity very much between plays, I mean, look at the Henry VI plays, that problem is pretty easy to brush aside. So let's talk a little bit about the action of this play, and we'll sum up at the end what it says about love and marriage. So in this play we have two wealthy families, the Pages and the Fords. The Pages have at least two children, Anne and William. And Anne has just turned 17, she is beautiful, and there's a lot of people that want to marry her, at least for the dowry that comes with her. The Fords, on the other hand, do not have any children, and Mr. Ford is a very jealous husband. But otherwise, throughout this play, both these housewives are portrayed as very clever and competent and excellent women, who manage their homes well and have control of the situation, or at least most of the time. In the background of the story, there are three competitors for Anne Page's hand in marriage. The first is Slender, nephew to Justice Shallow, who shows up in Henry IV Part 2. Slender is an idiot who has multiple embarrassing wooing scenes in which he makes a fool of himself, and has to actually be pushed along by Justice Shallow into his wooing of Anne Page. On the other hand, we have the hot-headed Frenchman Dr. Caius, who's a bit of a caricature and also very ridiculous. Finally, we have a young man named Fenton, who starts out wooing Anne for her fortune, but quickly falls in love with the person herself, and Anne falls for him too. The problem is that Mr. Page wants his daughter to marry Slender, while Mistress Page wants her daughter to marry Dr. Caius, and Anne wants to marry Fenton. So we have lots of conflict of interest here. The primary plot, however, deals with Sir John Falstaff, who, finding that he is out of money, again, decides that he must dismiss his followers Bardolph, Pistol, and Nym, and he decides to woo both Mistress Page and Mistress Ford at the same time, hoping to get some cash out of them. Mistress Page and Mistress Ford aren't idiots, and after comparing notes and discovering that both of them are being wooed by Falstaff at the same time, they decide to get revenge on him by pranking him. They act as though they're accepting his advances, but really it's all just a ploy to make a fool of him. All this is made more complicated by the fact that Pistol and Nym, who want revenge for being dismissed from Falstaff, go and snitch to Mr. Page and Mr. Ford. Mr. Page blows it off, having confidence in his wife's fidelity. But Mr. Ford is very jealous, and immediately assumes that his wife is doing something wrong, and he tries to catch her in the act. Mr. Ford disguises himself as a man named Brooke, who goes to Falstaff and pays him to try to seduce Mistress Ford. in order to test her fidelity and see if she truly will fall for the knight. And so in the background, Falstaff brags of his exploits to Ford, or Brooks, and Ford keeps trying to swoop in and catch his wife in the act, even bringing all of his friends along and making a big scene. And so Ford is made a fool of as well multiple times, because his wife actually is very faithful. And so, as Mistress Ford invites Falstaff over to her house, Mr. Ford shows up with a band of friends to prove her infidelity. Mistress Ford and Mistress Page hide the fat Falstaff in a laundry basket full of dirty linen, which is then carried out by servants and chucked into the Thames. The women then decide to further their revenge on both Falstaff and Mr. Ford by inviting Falstaff back again for another prank. Falstaff is easily tricked into coming back to Mistress Ford's house, and this time, as Ford rushes in, they disguise him as an old woman, the old woman of Brentford, whom Mr. Ford thinks of as a witch. When Mr. Ford sees Falstaff in the witch's disguise, he beats him out of his house. He also airs his wife's dirty laundry by going through the laundry basket in front of all of his friends, to everyone's embarrassment. After this, the wives finally tell their husbands what has been going on, demonstrating that they are merry and yet faithful wives. And all of them together decide to play one more trick on Falstaff. They invite him back, but this time not to Mistress Ford's house, but rather to the wood outside of Windsor. And they have him disguise himself as Herne the Hunter, who is a fairy. And so he's wearing horns, which is connected to the idea of being a cuckold, or a husband whose wife has cheated on him. Then as they meet him in the middle of the night, all of the characters disguise themselves as fairies, who then pinch Falstaff for being a mortal among them, and burn him with their tapers. Afterwards, he is unmasked and publicly scorned. However, in this moment, the pages all decided to use the opportunity to their advantage. Mr. Page, knowing that his daughter is going to be dressed in white, tells Slender to sneak off with her during all of the chaos. However, Mistress Page, recognizing that her husband is going to use this opportunity, decides to dress Anne in green, and then tells Dr. Caius to run off with her in the middle of all the chaos. Anne and Fenton, however, have used the opportunity to trick both of her parents and sneak off and elope. Both the person in white and green happen to be page boys, disguised. And so Slender and Dr. Caius, as well as Mr. and Mistress Page, are all made fools of. And the love and affection of Anne and Fenton wins the day. There are other subplots and tricks in this play as well that I've left out for time's sake, including the fight between Parson Hugh and Dr. Caius, which is all more or less part of the argument over Anne Page's hand, and it includes a lot more pranks and deceits. For now, though, I'd like to focus on the actual love stories, and how all of that wraps up. The main focus here is on married women rather than unmarried women. Usually the central character of a comedy is a young unmarried woman who struggles with the foibles of love and ultimately ends up getting married. And I guess you could say that's true about Anne Page, but she doesn't get a lot of lines in this play. She certainly wins in the end, but it's Mistress Page and Mistress Ford who really shine in this play. They outwit Falstaff, as well as their husbands, and their cleverness ultimately proves to everyone that they are excellent wives. They have excellent management of their own households. There are lots of little hints at the fact that the woman is the true ruler of the home in this story. After all, it's the women who truly have the final say in everything. They continually outwit the men and make fools of them. Although in Shakespeare's day, a married woman forfeited all of her property to her husband. This play demonstrates that women actually have management of their households, and therefore management of the finances of their households as well. Falstaff knows that the way to the Ford and Page money is through the wives. But also that true love is more important than money, where Fenton puts aside his desire for Anne's fortune and decides to elope with her, because he loves her. And Anne marrying an idiot or a hothead would not bring her joy, even if it brought her wealth. This play is a lot of fun, and I hope that you will enjoy it. If you'd like to see the characters Falstaff, Bardolph, Nym, Mistress Quickly, and some of the others in a history play, I recommend going back and checking out the Henry IV plays. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or watch another video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.